Hey, y'all, good evening. It's Monday, Monday. And I got a podcast for you all today, man. I got a special guest, super special guest, man. I think she's going to provide, I know that she's going to provide an awesome perspective on some stuff that I'm dumb on. And I know if I'm dumb on it, then that probably means someone else can use some more knowledge on it. And that's what we want to do here on Big Baby's podcast. But before that, let's get to the opening monologue. Do you want a revolution? Whoop, whoop, or what? Stomp? That looked like what's going on in Kirk Franklin's house. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the clips, heard the video, seen the video, whatever it is, of him talking crazy to his son. And I'm not going to get into the what's, why's, who's, and all of that stuff because I don't know why that conversation got there. I don't know why it got to a point that the son would leak a private record and leak a private conversation between he and his father. But obviously, there's something that he wants the world to know about his dad that maybe we're unaware of. And does it change how I feel about Kirk Franklin, the artist? No, because I am all about separating the art from the artist. And if there's something to be taken away from something that's positive, then I'm not the person who's going to tell you, oh, this person was terrible, you shouldn't consume their products. I understand putting money in their pocket, this, that, and the third. But for me, his music is good. It gives me a feeling that I like. When I'm in my religious bag or when I'm spending time with God, Kirk Franklin is one of the artists that I go to listen to music. But here's what I'll say. We have to understand that the things that we do in the dark can come to the light. And I understand there's privacy in this world, and we want certain things to be private because everything is not meant for everyone. But you have to understand that the person who you tell the world that you are is the person who you should be more than not. If you are showing yourself to the world as this got it together person, this positive person, this great person, but in the meantime, you're living in the shadows and you're the complete opposite when the camera's not on you, when the light's not on you, then you need to take some time to focus on yourself and look inside and see what about you needs to change. Maybe you change your public perception. Maybe you're no longer the nice guy like Chris Brown used to be and you embrace the bad boy. Or you change yourself on the inside so that shows on the outside. And that's the real revolution we need, Kirk Franklin. But enough of that. Let me bring my guest, Miss Kyle Nisbeth, in. Hey, Kyle, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm amazing. It's great to have you here. It's great to have a conversation with you. I don't think we've exchanged voices towards each other intentionally since 2015 when you were at UNC.
Yeah, and then I was going to say that would be a minute ago because I got there in 2015. I graduated in 2017, so that would have been like fresh me in North Carolina. Yeah.
And it's crazy. It's one of those random weekends. I was down in Raleigh and I saw that you were in Chapel Hill and I was like, yo, I'm in Raleigh with friends. Want to come out?
Right. And I think too, it was a really nice surprise to see you because, moving from a HBCU, historically Black college, to predominantly white institution, not having a car, not knowing anyone. It was like a really good, homegoing, not homegoing, but oh, okay. As I'm in my new place, here comes someone from my old life in a way, my last chapter. And it was kind of nice to have a bit of home with me. So
I'm happy I was able to provide that. And the breakfast you made was amazing. But anyways,
I'm glad I would say most people do not like my cooking. And I am really not a cook in any stretch of the imagination.
Well, I know that about you because you told us, and you remember, I guess it was my senior year in undergrad. You bought us all the stuff to make spaghetti, and you're like, y'all just make me spaghetti?
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem.
Oh my God. Yeah. Wow. Wow, that was such a good memory though. That was a good night, I feel like.
That was we often found ourselves in the same places, not necessarily with the same people, but we would be in the same places with a mutual group of people there. Like so often, I would see you places where my other friends would be, but I wouldn't be with that group of friends.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh,
Which I think also is like the lovely part of being at an HBCU. It's like you can't not go somewhere without seeing someone you know. And then it's like everything is just like 2 degrees of separation. You
it
know?
is. And I'll tell you one of the coolest things about the HBCU thing is when you see people out of town, kind of like our experience, it was like, hey, I'm relatively in your city, link up. Or you just see somebody, like I've seen some people at homecomings or just bar hopping. And it's a nice conversation. It's like, oh, hey, let's take this shot real quick or take
Yeah.
some little corny ass picture,
Yeah.
dap up and keep it moving just because it's like, I'm not supposed to see you here.
No, I know. And it's such a delight when you do. And I also love like when I'm wearing paraphernalia, whether it's like Morehouse stuff or Spelman stuff, like that people also feel comfortable enough coming up to me. And it's not like, since I'm at Michigan now, if I were to wear anything Michigan, people are like, go blue, whatever. I'm not a big school spirit sort of individual, so I really could care less. But the feeling I get when I see like other Morehouse people or Spelmanites, I'm like, ugh, like an
Yeah.
oasis in the desert. Like it's such a warm thing, like because you know how people feel about the school too. Like it's a different sort of connection that you have with Michigan than you would have with Spelman or Morehouse. So yeah, it was so great to see you there. Honestly.
So I want to hop into a HBCU PWI conversation just because of your experience. It kind of just popped into my head. But before that, let's tell the people who you are.
Okay, so I'm Kyle Nisbeth. I graduated from Spelman in 2015. And since then, I have been on a journey to the PhD in public health. So I went from there to the University of North Carolina, where I got my master's in 2017 in health behavior. And then directly from there, I enrolled at University of Michigan, for a PhD program in their health behavior and health education department. And my interests are really around like how does the experience of racism impact Black Americans generally? How does it impact our quality of life? And for the dissertation, you have to pick something specific. So I'm looking at motherhood because it answers a lot of like predictive questions that I have around Blackness, womanhood, motherhood. It's a question that I have about my sisters at Spelman, my sisters in life, and also about my mother and the mothers and the women that mother me. So I'm looking at how this idea of racial worries for children, how that stresses out mothers, essentially. That's like the basic question. Like going through life, like, you're always going to have your child's always your child. Like no matter how old we get, we're still somebody's child and they're still going to worry. And the problems we encounter as we age are more complicated. And our mothers are less able to control those situations. They're less able to protect us when we're out in the world and they're hundreds of miles away. So what does that worry look like? Like you can think with George Floyd, right? He was somebody's child at the end of the day. That's somebody's kid. And he called out for his mother at the end. So just trying to understand like the added stress burden that Black mothers carry when they mother in a racially hostile world, and how that affects them both like psychologically, but also at the biological level. So that's me, I guess. Yeah.
That's super interesting because you talk about always being someone's child. And the way that my mother worries about me at times is
Yeah.
honestly astonishing because it's like I have given you all of these years of relative responsibility, right?
Yeah.
I've not been the most responsible person, but I've been like I've been responsibly irresponsible. So, shit happens, but I'm not in a bad place in life.
Yeah.
And then at times, like, especially when I go home and I'm from the South, I'm from Georgia, and she's like super like, hey, make sure you're not bullshitting, you're stopping, you're not rolling. You don't give them any reason to pull you over or have any type of conversation with them. I go, Mom, I'm damn near 30. I'm not worried about these police. I'm not doing I'm not doing stuff that they want to pull anybody over for. I promise you. I don't mess with drugs. So there's no drugs in this car. I don't drink and drive. I'm not speeding. I'm not beating folks up. I ain't got no weapons in here. Like, I am a law-abiding citizen. And at the end of the day, that doesn't really matter. And her mom sensors like go off just because I want my son to come home, or I want to be able to call my son tomorrow, know that everything is okay. So I'm looking forward to having further conversations with you about what you're studying. So you said you went to Spelman, you went to UNC, and you're at Michigan now. I got to stop talking to you as if I don't know you. Like, we're going to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So what was the difference in those experiences versus, being at an HBCU for undergrad? And obviously the undergrad is more of a I love my school experience. You're building friends more often because you're at a younger stage of your life, as opposed to where you're in your master's program and now your PhD program where your school workish, and you create a network while you're there, but it is a little bit different. But going from a big HBCU name to two big popular PWI schools, like, what was that like?
The transition was difficult. Like, I'll tell you, on the first day, I get there and I'm sitting across from another Black woman, and she's like, well, like an A from an HBCU isn't like the same as an A from a PWI. And I'm looking at her like, what's this? We're in the same program and I got here before you. So I'm not sure if that commentary is like the most astute on HBCUs. So there's always, I feel like that kind of set the tone really for my experience at UNC in particular, not really at Michigan, because Michigan has that big pipeline between Spelman, Morehouse, and Michigan. So they're
like with the nerds, the
engineers. Yeah, the engineers. Yeah, so they're more familiar with our face. University of North Carolina, it was hard for me. I had gotten other feedback too from one professor in particular, like just even having a teaching assistant, we didn't have those. I don't know how to utilize a teaching assistant. And y'all did not explain this when I got here. You just assumed I would use them. And like, that seems very small now, but like back then I was like, I don't know what sis is here for. Like, she just grades and I don't really know her that well. I would not come to her if I had a problem. And then I also got a biostatistics professor there who's still teaching there, literally said to me, do you read journal articles? Can you comprehend what you're reading? Can you comprehend the method sections? And I'm like, I'm not even here for this. Like, this was the start of a conversation about something completely different. And I went to the dean at the time and I was like, this person said this to me. I felt like it was racially coded. And the person told me, it's interesting because this professor seems to have a lot of problems with students of color. I'm like, oh, wow, crazy. And was anything done? No, she's still sitting up there teaching now. Like, so there was a lot of that. Like, when there were a lot of police brutality instances in North Carolina when I was there. And the dean also was like, they have like a newsletter. And she basically said, if she were to talk about police brutality every single time it happens, like, people would become apathetic and they wouldn't care about it. And I'm looking at her like,
bro, don't nobody care what's in that newsletter anyways.
Right. Like, you could at least make a comment on it. Like, that was the other thing too. It almost felt like your Blackness was in a vacuum. Like, we're just not even going to talk about current events, nothing, as if I can show up here authentically as a student and forget that I'm Black. Because we're sitting up here talking about dogs' birthdays and current events, and you won't even speak on the fact that a man just died, like, a couple miles away. It really was jarring of an experience. I really didn't have a good time at the University of North Carolina. Like, I will say the best part about it is that it got me into my PhD program, and I'm thankful for that. I'm grateful for that, but it was a really rough experience for me.
So let's think about North Carolina. And I feel like that was your first introduction to what the South really is, as far as living it, breathing it, because you're originally from Jersey, right?
Yeah.
You go to Spelman in Atlanta, and Atlanta is not the South. As someone who grew up 45 minutes outside of Atlanta, where I'm from, versus where I went to college, two totally different places. And I can get from my house to the Georgia Tech exit in 30 minutes on a good day, right? So now you're getting to see what the real South is about, you know, and you're seeing but
it's still Chapel. I mean,
it is, and it's privileged South, because in Chapel Hill there's not many dummies walking around that campus, and the dummies, they play sports and their grades still look good because we know what happened in Chapel Hill, and I don't believe it.
Yeah, we do.
But you, as the Black student there, you are looked at differently because, for one, you're female in a master's program. So, excuse me, you're a woman. Sorry, not female. You're a woman in a master's program, and you're obviously not an athlete, you know, where it's like, oh, it makes sense why you're here. Then it's, oh, you didn't go here for undergrad? You went to Spelman? What's Spelman?
And the amount of times I've seen Spelman butchered, like Spellman. I'm like, y'all, I don't want to see none of this. No, I agree with you. And I will say my program is disproportionately women. Public health is filled with women. There's not a lot of men. And then also there's just gaping hole when it comes to where are your Black people, where are your Latinx people? They're not there. I could also say, like, where are the Asian Americans? They're not there either. So it is very white, and it comes from like a white savior sort of place. A lot of public health is centered around like, how can I help you? Not like, how can I assist you with seeing the strengths that are already in your community and already in your life. Not how can I reinforce what's already good. It's like, no, y'all need help. Let me come on in and let me tell you what you need to be doing, what you need to be focusing on. And it's a lot of that. And so also the curriculum is like that. It's very deficit mindset. And any and everything I heard about Black people was negative, which was also hard because, you know, Spell House has, or Spark House, I should say, has a public health program. And so I understand what it's like to be in a public health class where every commentary about Black people is not negative. Like, there are strengths in our community, but you wouldn't know it if you went to a PWI, like to the point where I have to say something like, y'all have only provided negative statistics. It's low hanging fruit. There are a wide range of disparities in Asian American communities and white communities. Why is it always us? Why is every article us? I don't know.
We're the easy targets. And it's funny you say that. I was sitting in a class one day, probably about a year and a half ago. And it's one of those ethics classes. And let me tell you, I love being one of the few Black people in an ethics class because you get to talk about racial situations outside of your typical American's thought process of race, right? Because a lot of people think that race is an American thing, and it's not. Racism is an American thing, not an international thing, right?
Yeah. So
we're talking about South Africa, and we're talking about the mines in South Africa. And the mine workers spoke one language, the Black mine workers. Mm-hmm. Then you have the white middle management speaking their own language. And all of like the directions and everything is in that language that they speak. Mm-hmm. And this is in the early to mid 1990s. So, you know, apartheid is still like, it's still fresh.
Yeah.
And we're talking about the issues that are happening, like the lack of safety there, the lack of reporting of safety incidents and all this bullshit. And the white kids are bumping their heads with each other, talking about, well, I see that in a few years, this will fix itself because eventually the managers will learn the language of the native people, or the native people will move up and be able to get management positions because this is over, because apartheid is over. And it'll work itself out in about 10 to 20 years. And I go, you know, segregation legally ended in America in 1964. You see what we got going on now? And they're like, It had nothing to say because
Yeah.
the here's the thing about white privilege that I think gets missed in so many white privilege conversations. It's not how amazing it is and the stuff that it gets you. It's the stuff that it allows you to be ignorant to and still be successful.
Right. Right. And it's interesting that you brought up South Africa because I don't know if we talked about this, but I did my study abroad in South Africa. So I was there for a semester. And yeah, so also the mines were also instrumental in, I guess, passing forward HIV and AIDS because they would have like a group of, I guess prostitutes would be the term. And those same prostitutes would service like the entire dorm. And then those men would go back to their families and spread it to their families that way. So the mines are great for so many reasons. Obviously, I'm kidding. But yeah, there's a lot of complexity in South Africa. And it is interesting. Like I always say, I would not want to be anything other than like a Black or brown person because I think our world is colored in a way that if you're white, you don't necessarily see. There's like, they called like the veil, Du Bois's The Veil. It's like you're constantly viewing yourself in the eyes, like through your own eyes, but through the eyes of other people. And so you're constantly making that, making these assertions in your mind before you even act because you're like, okay, so they're going to think this about me. So then I'm going to do this. And you're constantly having this conversation with yourself, which also slows you down, right? Like the point of racism is to slow you down because you got to justify X, Y, and Z. You worried about X, Y, and Z, and you can't even do what you came here to do because you got all these roadblocks. But yeah, it is interesting how you can put forth literally the same exact thing that happened in our own history and people can't see it. They can't see history repeating themselves. They can't see patterns. It's like, yeah, I also did a lot of ethics work when I was at University of North Carolina for community-based participatory research, which is just, and it's like, in the simplest form, it's essentially when the researcher works with a community member on a project. But there are a lot of ethical issues with that because there can be issues of incentive, like or people don't feel like they have choice or agency. You basically don't really use the community partner. You have their name on it, but you didn't ask them for any advice on any part of your study. So did they really work with you or did they just provide you with people? There's so many ethical considerations in research, but also like, as you said, it's a really great vantage point with which to approach racial problems in a way that makes people feel more comfortable because it seems more theoretical.
Yes. And that's the part that I like to get the conversation to. Let's take it off of race, not because I want to lessen what race is, but I want you to get vulnerable and I want you to start speaking honestly. And I know if we use any race buzzwords, you immediately become triggered and now you're guarded. So you're not going to give me the information that I can lead you to, where I can get from you to lead you to hopefully healing, right? Because one of the hardest parts of learning is admitting that you're wrong. And
Right.
when you talk about things of race, religion, the treatment of women, it's hard to get people to be vulnerable and say what they truly feel in order to have the conversation that creates the change. Because if you say, you know what, I was raised to believe that so and so is lesser than me, and that's what I thought for the first 23 years of my life. Something happened, it changed, I'm working on it, but I still have some pieces of me that aren't there yet.
Right.
Things that help someone go, okay, well, I see where you're coming from. I can understand and relate to that because guess what? I come from a fairly conservative family too, who thinks this way, who operates that way. And this is what we do. And I know that it's wrong. And I'm making steps to correct myself. But if you never put it out there, no one can ever have the honest conversation that you need to get you where you want to go, which is why I hate cancel culture.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, me and Courtney actually were talking about this earlier. I do feel like some people deserve to get canceled. I mean, there are some things that you
Yes.
can't tell me you didn't know was crazy. But yeah, for the most part, I think there's not there's no ability for people to grow, for people to change. So people don't even feel comfortable expressing a difference in opinion because they just feel like I'm going to get attacked and then I'll never get a job again. Um,
We've
I
stripped
also,
nuance.
huh? What did you
We've
say?
stripped nuance from like everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's one of the things I love about being a researcher because you can take nothing after you go through like a significant amount of training, you realize you can take nothing for face value and everything has nuance. Nothing is black or white. Everything has gray.
And
So
and research is so interesting because you can make the research say what you want it to say.
yeah,
And for people who go, well, this is well researched. Yeah, I know. But here's something I learned about research. Shit, maybe in high school or early college, I can make my research back up my argument. And it can all be valid. And I can create another valid piece of literature that can get published that is totally one-sided, telling the story that I want to tell. And you know this because when you're researching against a deadline, sometimes you get away
right.
from researching, allowing the research to build the product. And you go, here's the end state. Now let me get this research to make my end state. Because if I don't get this desired end state, I have more and more work that I have to do in order to get to where I actually want to be. But I got to get the fuck up out of school. I got to go to the next school. Or I got to go make this money.
Yeah. And published is also like with an abstract, right? Because what we find is, first off, most published research, the lay person, the average person does not have even access to. Okay. Like, unless you're attached to a school, it's going to be hard for you to actually gain access to articles in a general sense. You're not going to go on Google Scholar and see anything that you can see. Then, two, in terms of publishing, people don't publish their null results or like things that are not significant. They don't publish that, generally speaking. And also, if their hypothesis they find is incorrect, unless it's housed within a bunch of hypotheses that they're testing, they're not going to tell you that this was incorrect. So you're only seeing like a biased version of the field, if you can even see it. And we also find, we've talked like in research classes, it's kind of like, is this also wasting our own time, right? Because if you don't tell me what did not work, I too will make the same mistake and try to do the same thing. So if people were more transparent about like what works, what doesn't work, we probably could be faster. And even then, if you think like, I think it takes 17 years for once research is conduct research, to publish it, to get it out into like disseminate it, and then get it to impact policy in some way, it takes like 17 years. So by the time you actually do that, your research is also now dated. So we're constantly like, I feel like in this like cat and mouse game of like trying to chase, to be up to date or to give people, results that are actually that merit conversation, but it can be hard.
And to bring it down a little bit, you talked about people not showing their bad research. It's just like, or not even their bad research.
Just like research that goes nowhere. Like there's
research that goes nowhere. Like the shit where you actually do a bunch of learning, but it took you nowhere on your journey. It's just like when we take pictures. How often do we take pictures and what do we actually post? There's a difference in what we actually live through life and what we take than what we're comfortable showing the world. And if we got more comfortable showing our ups, our downs, our flaws, and all of these different things that are part of life, I think that people will be more comfortable publishing something that didn't go anywhere. It's like, hey, look, I did all of this. I got all of this information. I did not get the information that I was looking for, but this will save you some time because you get to read this compilation of what I've put together instead of having to read all of these articles that I read to get nothing. But let's get to public health because I never had I want to say my first conversation with public health was with you. And I'm not going to date the conversation. I can think of a range, but we were in undergrad and you were telling me you were doing international studies major, right? And you minored in public health. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. That's right.
Okay. And anytime someone says if somebody tell me doing international studies, I'm like, what you gonna do? You gonna teach it? You gonna be a
Yeah.
lawyer? Or
Most times you have to get a graduate degree. I feel like for most fields, right? Like to do anything like super substantial, you need a graduate degree.
yeah,
But
is nothing.
yeah, I think I came to Spelman wanting me a sociology major, and my parents were like, no. So I said, okay, well, like, what else can I do here that I'm like really interested in? Actually, I came as a math major, and then
Yeah, nah.
yeah. And I do enjoy math, the process of math. I like the logic and the reasoning behind math, but it just wasn't in the cards. So then I moved to sociology, and then I moved to international studies. But I think the greatest thing about that degree was that it forced you to do a study abroad. And when I did the study abroad, what I realized was we have the exact same problems here that we do in South Africa. They just might be on a different scale. And the number one issue that I have with people who do like international work is when they go in and then they actually have no context for like what the political history of that country is, the general history of that country, the cultural norms, and the people that they're working with. They know absolutely nothing besides the fact that they want to help the kids. That is vexing to me. Also, not to mention, like, it's not sustainable. Like, if you don't train people there to be able to do what you are intervening there to do, it just requires that now for any time they want to do something public health wise, they have to get someone outside of their community who knows nothing about their community to come in. And yeah, I mean, yes, capitalism, money, right? But I realized I was like, I don't want to be a part of that. So I think what's best is actually that I help the people that look like me in my own community, like that I can do because I understand the history and the social forces that operate in the United States. And therefore I can be of best use here and not in South Africa or some other country on the continent.
And that takes me back to some of that saviorism that you were talking about that you see in your curriculum. And it's people. And I think that it's a cultural thing from a select group of people that believe that their way of living is the right way of living. Not a right way of living, but the right way of living. And they want to impress that upon other people without understanding what it's like to have their background and to strip what they've known and learned their entire life, which could be wrong, and then implement something brand new. And it's like, if you come in my house, I don't care how dirty my house is, and you tell me that my house is fucking filthy, you need to clean this shit up right goddamn now, I'm not gonna want to hear what you have to say. But if you come in and go, well, let's see, I think if we put this here, it would actually bring out this right here, or this will create more space for you, And when it's given to you like that, it's like, okay. Or if I trust you, like my mom can walk in here right now and tell me everything that's wrong with this place, and I go, okay, you got it. And because I trust her, I listen. But don't come in my country telling me how fucked up my country is, and then you're gonna like show me how you're gonna fix it for me short term, but you're not gonna stay here and live this fight with us, and you're not gonna equip us with the tools to do it ourselves.
No, not to mention, like, going back, like, maybe full circle to what you're talking before with the minors, you're not even speaking my language. You're just yelling at me to do things that I don't understand the rationale behind it. And I really don't understand what you're saying. So it's not going to happen. It's like the same way with how they treat, I'll say, like how public health has traditionally viewed like eating behaviors or eating habits. It's always like cultural foods. I think it's something like 70% of the United States is either overweight or obese. I think we can come away from cultural foods because it's an American problem. It's not a Black people problem. It's not Asian, Latinx. It's an American issue. So the second you say cultural food, your cultural foods are wrong, you lose me. Or sometimes people live in food deserts where like they literally don't even have access to the food that you say they need to be eating. So how do I make that sustainable either? You want me to be like 2 hours on the bus to get this food? Like I have other things I need to do. I have other priorities. It's just, yeah, I wish people would be a little bit more thoughtful when they attack these problems and thought more to like what you said with sustainability in mind. Because they really don't. I think that's a major issue in public health.
Yeah, so you go to South Africa and you see some of those, you see what's going on there, and that kind of like really gets your wheels spinning on public health.
Right.
And you start down the public health road, and you said so you minored at Spelman, and you had the opportunity to take public health classes with other Black people.
Yeah. So what's nice about Spark House is that the public health program is taught by professors who are actually full-time CDC staff. So you have, and everyone, when I was there, everyone was Black. So you have people in like real time being able to, so it's like you can kind of imagine yourself in the field, right? Because you're like, so someone who recently passed, his name is Dr. Timothy Cunningham. He like really believed in my ability. And also I have a couple of other professors who are part of that program also. And it allowed me to see like where I can go. And I initially thought about public health because I was always interested in medicine, but I'm interested in like, why do people behave the way they do as it relates to their health? Not necessarily, I don't want to treat somebody. That's not me. Like blood, gut, like that's not me. But I am interested in like your health and just like more like psychologically or socially, how do we get here? And so that's why I minored in it. And then I knew I wanted my PhD, but I was kind of unsure exactly what I wanted to study. So I figured I'll just do a master's in it. So that's why I applied to master's programs. But come to find out, apparently you have to, like most of the programs require that you have a master's anyway. So I wasn't going to get into PhD programs if I had applied in the first place. But yeah, I kind of was like, oh, I want more context. Like I want to know more about the field of public health. And I think for a lot of people, it's a field they don't really understand. Because usually when I say public health, people think medicine or like vaccines or pharmacy or like doctor. That's what they assume. And while that is incorporated in public health, we look at like your health in all the ways that you live, work, and grow, and worship. So it's like, education is in public health, housing is in public health, just anything you can imagine, public health can work there.
So I think the first conversation I ever had about public health was with you, because it's not something that's talked about. And unfortunately, in the Black community, we don't talk too much about any type of health.
Yes. Yeah. And there are a lot of theories around that, around Black people and health behavior and health seeking habits, actually.
Let's talk about it.
So the number one is sometimes it's known as sojourner syndrome. Sometimes but most commonly it's known as John Henryism. So John Henry was it's like an old fable where it's like, it's John Henry versus the steam engine. And so they're both trying to reach the end game, like run through a tunnel. And what happens is John Henry, he's Black. He works so hard. He defeats the steam engine, but then he dies immediately. Like his heart gives out. So the euphemism is that like Black people will work themselves to death, essentially. It's like this high effortful coping. So instead of necessarily dealing with the health related problems or the stress related problems that you have at the minute, you think to yourself, I don't have time to be focused on this. Like I've got to take care of my family. I got to take care of my kids. Like I just need to pull through. And you work so hard that you actually give out before you're supposed to, essentially. And it's kind of like what occurs when you have to deal with the chronic nature that is racism in America. Our effort has to be higher than other people's to get through.
So Outside of race, and maybe it's the only race, why do you think John Henryism is such a big thing in our community?
Um, I think it's a big thing in our community because it's not a big thing with America in general. Because America wants to pretend like there's not an issue.
Mhm.
So I now have to pretend like there's no issue, even noting that the issue here is that I have to work 2 times harder to get to the same place. But unfortunately, I don't have the space to talk about that. Um, Nor will I get validation from the powers that be in order to get there. So I got to keep going. We don't have time to ponder. Like it's always like, they talk about like generations where the parents struggled, but now they're able to give their child the life they wish they had, kind of thing. And then that
Mhm.
child has the ability to sit there because they're not out here surviving, right? They're not in survival mentality. So they can sit here and really just ponder and think like what I'm able to do in school, like I'm getting paid to think, right? But if you're always in survival mode, you can't do that. And I think for our community writ large, like we've been in survival mode so long. So we don't have the ability to, like, you have to keep pushing. There's
Yeah,
no other
I
way.
agree with you. Like, if I'm worried about putting food on my table, I'm not worried
Yeah.
about how I feel while doing it because I know I have to eat to live, and I can worry about this other stuff later, which I won't ever worry about it. I'll just let it tear me apart.
Yeah.
So in survival mode, how do you think we can find that happy balance of surviving, busting our ass to get what we need, but also giving ourselves the care that we deserve?
I think that's a difficult question because I think largely the self-care space is like everything costs money, right? Like, oh, I'm going to do self-care today. Like, I'm going to take a bath. Okay, well, I don't even have a tub. So how do I do that? Or like I'll take a vacation. But what if I don't have the money to take a vacation? Like, what if I don't actually have the ability to even take vacation time? How do I give myself, like, how do I alleviate myself of stress when I don't even have the money to go on a vacation? Um, I don't know. I almost feel like that's like a question that every individual has to ask themselves, right? Because like I think it's indulging in your hobbies when you can, the things that bring you joy, whatever that looks like to you. Because I don't think it's feasible to say like we'd have to have policy change in order to really make that happen for people at every level.
Whoa, 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 whoa. We can't change our policy. America was built on busting
Yeah.
your ass. And if you bust your ass, you have an opportunity to get what you deserve. I don't see why we need to change policies around here.
No, I know. And this is kind of like what we were talking about before the show, where I definitely remove myself from the presence of people who think like that. So I haven't had many conversations and much practice in um, finding arguments that are appealing to people who are like, oh, I'm not giving, but I'm not going to do policy change. Oh, I don't think we need to do a minimum wage of $15 an hour, even though it's going to be nearly impossible for you to do anything making $10 an hour here. Um,
Na Federal minimum wage was the same that it was when I was making minimum wage. And
right.
I worked in high school and I got my first job in '08. Let me see. Minimum wage was, I believe, 650. No, 655, something like that. No, it was 585 when I started, excuse me.
Oh,
And
wow.
I was making 650. By my senior year, minimum wage it went up to 725, and the federal minimum wage has not changed. And you can miss me with all of your, well, people should get more skills. Yeah, ideally, but at the
You're right.
same time, McDonald's was essential. McDonald's in my city didn't close when stuff was closing.
Okay.
Motherfucking McDonald's was open every day.
Right.
So the idea of asking someone, let's just, because if you work a minimum wage job, you're also not going to get you're going to cap at 40 if you're lucky, but you're probably going to work closer to 30 to 35 hours. I'm not going to do math in public because that's dumb. I'm going to say
I already told you I couldn't major in it, so let's not get me to do it.
I was a political science major who took one math class my freshman year, and I made a C in it. Let's see. So 725 times 30 is 217.50 times 4. That's $870 a month.
Right.
You want to hear something funny?
What?
This trip that we were talking about before, right?
Yeah.
That amount could very be easily spent in one night by one person, depending on what it's done. And it's like, and wow, we sound like really privileged right now. But the fact of the matter is that people are living off of other people's fun money.
Right. Exactly. And even I didn't really value, well, let me not say that, but I, for a long time, did not visit with my friends after undergrad because I felt like it was a reminder of the fact I wouldn't even call, or like, it was a reminder of the fact that I was not with everyone. Like everyone was still together and I was over here alone. And I honestly didn't want any reminders of this. Right. But it wasn't until like, this past year, and I had a conversation with a friend who was like, what do? Like, you never do anything. You're a bad friend. And I'm like, I don't think I'm a bad friend. But at the same time, I'm like, I guess I have been pretty absent. And so I've made it a point to be more present, especially with the pandemic, because it's like, oh, this isolation thing is not a joke. And me trying to sit up here and not text nobody is not going to happen. But even for me, like, I work extra hours. Like I work 10 extra hours a week, which is the maximum that they allow you to work here. If you're a PhD student that accepts a fellowship from the university, they restrict how many hours you can work. So, one summer I actually had to end up taking a job at Ann Taylor. Also, I was a manager at Ann Taylor, and like as a manager, I was making $10 an hour. And even that wasn't really doing anything to offset the cost of my or offset like my salary. Like I still was not making enough from Ann Taylor and the school. And like, I can't work any extra hours. Like I have nothing else in my, like I have no room. So I can say too, like I can still understand the struggle. Like we don't make no money.
I know. And you are in like a really unique situation because you're still a student.
Yes. Well, a lot of my friends are not. So I'm looking around like, hold on. Like, I can't afford that. I can't go there. Sorry, I'm not going to drink here. Like, water for me. Yeah, I understand that.
Yes, because like I'm familiar with some of your friend group, especially your male friend group. Like, I know the life that they live. I live it with them.
Yeah. Right. And I'm not there yet.
And we are just so far removed from school that like, I mean, I'm pretty sure you've got some random FaceTimes on some of our random weekends when we all end up together.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you should be here. And it's like, I got class. Like,
right. Y'all know I can't. Like, but even then, I would say my experience is still like it's not real in a way, because one of the things I learned when I was in South Africa, right? Like we did at the end of the trip, one of the leaders of the group was like, and this was also, I'll say this was not Spelman sponsored. So I was with other people. And he said, so do you guys feel like you now know what it's like to live in a township in South Africa? And before anyone could raise their hand, because I already knew what the sort of group was, I said, absolutely not. No, we cannot understand, because we have a time clock. We're leaving. This, no matter what we have experienced, is still going to end and we're going to go. The same thing with my student status, right? Like, I'm not looking at this as any longer than when I graduate. I'm like, oh, when I graduate, I'll make some money. This is not like a long-term lived experience. It's not like I'm looking ahead at 20 more years. So there is still an element that I'm missing because of the nature of the work that I'm doing and the fact that it has an end date.
You ain't missing shit, to be honest with you.
No, but I mean, like, in terms of empathizing with the lived experience.
Oh no, I know you're being serious right now. I'm bullshitting. I'm just saying.
Yeah, I know, but you know, I'm like
embrace where you are. And it's funny you say that, because I was having a conversation on this pod about a month or two ago and we're talking about like living abroad and going on, like, even your semester is way different than going on a vacation, right?
Right.
And I spent a year out of the country. Great year, by the way. Absolutely loved it. But when you talk to people, oh yeah, I've traveled here. I went on vacation here. Like, look. The shit you do on vacation does not give you any type of insight into what life is actually like here. You get the highlights. You may see some stuff on vacation that's not the most, the most appealing about the place, but you don't actually live it. And you don't have the opportunity to build relationships with people who live it and understand what they are going through and how you look at it. You go, I'm complaining about this right now in my life. Don't get me wrong. What I'm going through is awful. And I don't wish it on anybody.
But it ain't that.
This person I met over here would take my experience right now and consider their life a success just to get treated this poorly, because they get treated so poorly where they are.
Right.
So let's cycle back to public health. I want to keep cycling back here.
Okay.
How do we increase the conversation in our community, the Black community, in a way that it's received? I don't even say received, just so that we're aware, because I think that, when you spoke about what public health is, and it's not just, the doctor portion of your life, it's about your entire health and the system that you live in. How do we create a conversation that creates awareness and creates action? And I mean like daily actions in between people. I'm not asking for policy changes, because although we need it, I'm to the point to where I don't believe, as a Black man, I'm not going to ask the system to care about my people more than I care about my people. So it's like, what can we do individually and at the small level to try to increase our people's public health?
So I would say, in the nature of the pandemic, the issue like here that I think is most pressing is isolation. Because if we think of community, like, excuse me, or if we think of communication, right? Mm-hmm. Healthy communication is like not what we're doing. You need to be in front of somebody, like face to face. And like, so this isn't how, like, Zoom is not like, your body doesn't code it as in the same way that it would code a in-person conversation. Similarly, when you go out and all you see is masks, what is that? That's like junk food versus like good cooked food to your body. That's junk food communication. Same with like Zoom. So I would say, it would be thinking about how you can connect with people, especially now with the vaccine. Like, the vaccine is so important because it allows us to now move from like these sorts of junk food communication methods to like actually like in-person sorts of things. And I would say it's like very important that you actually check up on folks. Like, even if it's just like a text, be like, hey, like, you want to go get food next week or something like that? Like, you want to go hang out at the park? You want to just get together? I think we underestimate actually how important communication is. And like, especially with elderly people, loneliness kills. You will die faster if you don't see people and you don't connect, versus then if like you're a engaged and active individual. Same with, you can see like the mental health of students, like how it's plummeted because they don't have the ability to just chit chat with people, hang out, So I think that's actually the most important thing, is like getting the vaccine and then being able to actually communicate with folks like that are outside of your bubble in a healthy and safe way. I think that's number one. And that can be for pandemic or otherwise. And then just in a general sense, I think encouraging people, like what we were saying before earlier, where I don't tell people like I'm doing well because I'm not necessarily doing well. And I don't want other people to think like I'm out here killing it and like there's something wrong with them. Like when I'm transparent about how I'm feeling, they are more honest about how they're doing, which can only help both of us. Right. So I think also encouraging people to like do therapy and like being honest, like, hey, I'm not doing well. So I read this book about XYZ, or I went to a therapist and I feel a lot better. I feel lighter. I think it's so beneficial. And you can also just extend that to like, hey, did you get checked this year? Like not even like an STI thing, like just have you seen your doctor lately? Like, how are you doing? Like just stuff like that and add it into conversations so it seems normal. Because right now people just don't even want to talk about it.
Bro,
They don't want like it's weird.
I don't ask any of my friends have they ever got checked. And it's just an assumption that, yeah, you clean.
And yeah, no, I feel like that's why it just needs to come into like our dialogue to make it, to normalize it. Like it's not a crazy thing. Like just you have a checkup once a year with health insurance. Like really use it. Just
bro,
go.
I know people who have great health insurance. Don't have to pay to go to the doctor. Don't have to pay for medicine. Can go to the doctor whenever they feel like it. And they don't go.
I know. And you know, men are terrible at that. They actually find that men live longer when they're married because women are more likely to be the ones to encourage them to go to doctors, schedule appointments, eat better, like simply by being with a woman. She gives you extra years of your life.
Do you want me to tell you how my life changed when I had a woman in my life every day, like in my presence?
I'm surprised.
I mean, the house was just, it smelled better. You know, it was more light in here.
Right.
I like cared more about myself. I started like, you know, icing after physical activity, getting more massages, even though I like knowing that I need them. Hell.
So it's like those same conversations you have with your partner, you could have that with your friend.
All right.
In theory, you could do it.
I'm in this group text. Right.
Right.
And let me see who's in this group text. Pierce, Josh, Jew, JP, Gambles, Nico, Justice. If I'm forgetting anybody in the locker room, my sincerest apologies and myself.
Is Dell in it?
And Dell. Yes, sorry, Dell.
Right, I figured. Okay. So the gang, the whole gang.
Right. So let me drop in there. Hey guys. You guys seen a therapist lately?
But see, that's not how you do it. You need to be like, y'all chill on the couch, and then you talk about how you went to go see somebody for whatever problem you had and how fabulous it was, right? And you just let it linger. Now he might respond, he might not respond, but the seed is planted, nevertheless, and he will come back. Okay, the more I find truly, like the more you just casually just talk about. I mean, this is my life, right? So I'm always talking about it. My parents are overwhelmed. Overwhelmed, don't want to hear about nothing no more. But this is just like, I just talk to you about this. Just talk. You know, they don't always have to respond to you, but just the seed, that's all you need is the seed.
I tried therapy towards the end of January.
Yeah.
One of the best decisions I've made in the last 7 years.
Right? Life-changing.
And it was being able to talk to someone who doesn't know me. And if I don't like how this conversation goes, I actually never have to talk to you again. But I was able to like get some stuff out there and then get some feedback on it, and then like have the ability to think about what was given to me and be like, hey man, I got some deep-seated stuff that I've been fighting since childhood that I didn't even know that I've been fighting. Because do you get massages?
I used to, yeah.
Okay, so you know how when you go a long time without getting a massage, you may leave the massage like super sore because you had some pain that you forgot was there because you had just, you know, forgot about it and it was so damn tight that you didn't feel it anymore.
Right. Yeah.
That's what therapy's been for me, is like I've suppressed so much stuff that's happened in my life that I forgot that these events happened to me. Mm-hmm. And I've been carrying myself a certain way because of that. And it's been detrimental to my life in like many relationships, and not just intimate relationships, but actual relationships with people.
Yeah.
Because of my trauma. And I say trauma like that because people love to like overuse the word trauma, right? It's like, no, I had this traumatic event that I don't even like remember. I don't even remember it being traumatic because it was like a series of events. It was like behavior, and I adjusted to the behavior in order to survive. You know what I mean? And
I'm with you on that because it feels like so extreme. Sometimes I'm like, what I went through couldn't be trauma because I don't have PTSD and like nobody shot me, nobody hit me. I feel you. I feel that way too.
Like, you know how our parents, they raised us to believe certain things that are wrong right now, but they didn't do it. They did it like they were doing the best that they could and they were caring. Yeah. But it's just like, yeah, you're where you were at in your generation and this thought process just doesn't work anymore. And I know you raised me this way, but no, I can't do this. I'm sorry. I love you. And I want you to think closer to the way I'm thinking than the way you are. But
yeah.
Well, look, we're hitting the hour mark. And there's a few more things I want to talk to you about that are just general stuff.
Okay.
So I've talked about it on this podcast. I've joked about it and played with it on Instagram. And I've had some serious conversations with people about the word female. Okay.
I don't like it.
I am here for education because ignorant me has used the word female never to be disrespectful towards women. I think there are better words that add better dramatic effect than female to disrespect a woman. Okay. So when I'm actually using the word, I'm referring to a woman, and I don't know what in life brought me to this point. And I've had conversations with different women who have different points of view on it. But explain to me why men should not use the word female to refer to women.
Well, I guess if asking me, I would just say, I think I can speak generally because I also want to say like anything that I feel is anecdotal just to me, and I can't necessarily generalize it. However, this I think can be generalized by saying as a community, I don't think women like the word. So if, it's like a certain community asks, please don't use the word, you shouldn't use the word. It's like with the N-word. If somebody pulls out, a white person comes up with the hard ER and you say, don't use the word, what do you think when they're like, explain it to me? It's like, no, just don't use it. Don't use it. Why are you using it? But it's also like, nobody calls men males. And it's just kind of like, that is a biological sort of term when you're describing animals. Oh, that's a female bear. It's like, that's not what this is. We don't do that with people. It's
so why is it that the people who are fighting for equality for women call themselves feminists?
I mean, there's also womanist.
Are there actually womanists?
Yeah, that's another term. Now this is not my area of expertise, so like I would have to just look it up and then tell you like the differences. Because this is not my area.
I'm tongue in cheek here at this point right now because it's something that I'm working on doing because I don't want to be disrespectful on accident. But
it's just weird. Personally, like it just makes me feel weird because I'm like, okay, so I'm a female human being. Okay, that's what he thinks. A female human being. I don't know. It's just weird. Frankly, I just think it's weird. Yeah, personally, it's just odd.
So I sent you that post yesterday, right? And I found it. I found it, worth talking about.
I knew you would. Yes.
And let me just tell the listeners what we got here.
Yeah.
Things men can do to make women feel more safe. I'm going to read through all of them and then we can go one by one. 1, keep distance. 2, don't run up from behind. 3, offer to walk female friends home. 4, keep your hands to yourself. 5, be an active bystander. 6, keep comments to yourself. 7, don't stare. Some of this, I can just say, you're absolutely right. Shouldn't do none of this ever. And in the situations that require it, do it with a lot of caution because you got to understand how this can go. So, for one, keep your distance. If you're walking behind a woman, especially at night, bro, don't be in her space. But I don't think that's a man or woman thing. For me, it's like, hey, bro, I don't need nobody that close to me when you walk. Just all the sidewalk over here. Speed up, slow down, get out my space. I don't know what you want.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, with keep distance, right? Like, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to get nervous if it's dark and I'm 5'2" and some change. So, I mean, I lift pretty seriously, but I'm not about to be able to take down a grown man. That's not going to happen for me. So I'm across the street. I'm that's me. And I would prefer distance.
I was looking at your traps earlier and I was like, Kyle lifts.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, I lift pretty seriously. I'm not going to front it. I also think it's like some people say working out and some people say lift. And I think that definitely designates a difference.
Oh yeah. Now when you say you lift, I know you moving iron around. You picking up and you putting it down.
Yeah, like I'm the only woman in the weight room looking around like, where we at? Just me today? Okay.
Hey, so another question. You talk about that. I've never been a guy to make a pass at a woman in the weight room. Like when I'm in the gym, I'm there to lift. Right. I'm there to get my workout on and get the hell on. But I've obviously seen attractive women in the gym before.
Yeah.
Is there proper etiquette to making a pass at a woman in the gym without, like being disrespectful? Like, hey, I'm attracted to you. I want to holler at you. But I mean, I obviously we're not going in between sets or, or in between reps. Like, hey, baby, you need a spot.
Right.
Is there a proper way to do that?
I think like to bring this back to what we're talking about now too, like with the don't stare, 9 times out of 10, men don't do anything with the stare. So you just making me feel weird by staring at me because you're not gonna come over noise. So like you get that at the gym too, with the like dudes will just stare at you. And then like you might look up and catch their eye and then they just like look away. But it's like I felt the eyes on me this whole time.
That's some punk ass shit. Like if you're gonna stare, and don't get me wrong, I've been caught staring before. Own your stare. Like what I like to do is if I'm looking at somebody, it may not even be the stare. It may be I just keep looking over. You know what I mean? And either way, you can feel both of them. You can feel the stare, or you can feel somebody just.
Yeah.
If you catch me looking, I'm ready to lock eyes now because I want to see that what you're gonna do with the eye lock. Because if you match my eye lock, now I know I can approach you and have a conversation. Yeah. If you cut your eyes real quick, then come back, I know that you're open to the conversation, but I know that you're not an alpha personality. And that's a whole nother conversation that we're not going to have here. I can't get into my calculus here now. But but if you're going to stare, bruh, don't be afraid once the person you're staring at catches you. Now, if a woman is squatting, lunging, all that shit, bro, get eyes up, mister. You get one look when you walk through.
Yeah. Like
I
think it can be like, because you can also say, right, if it's attention that I want from somebody that I want to provide me attention, then I'd be welcome into the stare, right? But if it's someone I don't want the attention from, then no, I don't want the stare. So it's kind of hard, right, when you're giving advice, because you're like, well, if you look at you and you look at me and you think we'd be compatible, then stare. But if you think I'm not going to give you the time of day, don't stare. That's horrible advice.
But that's where we are as men, is that the rule is if I like you, it's okay. If I don't, it's not. And it's like, yes, but there has to be a middle ground to where I'm okay to make a pass at you and I'm not harassing you, to where it's like, you know what I'm saying? But
Yeah. So I'll say,
I'm not
like,
saying
I've asked somebody out at the gym personally, right?
you have.
So yes, I have. So did I ever stare this man down like he was a piece of meat? No, never did. And I
Was
had
he
the
a piece
balls
of meat
up,
though?
huh?
Was he a piece of meat? Yes, he was, because he's a man.
Whatever. Either way, I'm saying I never made him uncomfortable. I don't even think he knew I was interested. Okay, so I never made him feel away. And then when I went up to him like while he was not in the middle of a set, not, just like he was off to the side doing his, I think taking his stuff, like gonna leave. And then I just said my piece. And unfortunately he had a girlfriend. And then I never made it weird again. Like I tried to not like run into him like that. I tried to not like ever like catch his eye. Like I never wanted to make him feel uncomfortable about going to the gym when he wanted to go to the gym. We just happened to go to the gym at the same time. I'm like, why can't dudes just do that? Like, not the constant like, oh, but I'll try her again next week, or I'll stare at her again till the end of time. Like,
Because a lot of dudes come from the mindset it's no until it's yes.
right, which that's harassment.
It is. And if you think about a lot of stuff that happened in our younger sexual lives, it was a lot of begging and pleading and finally
Yeah.
getting a yes. And I don't want to make it seem like dudes were disgusting creeps, because there were a lot of women who like wanted to do stuff but didn't know if it was okay for them to do it, or didn't want to be labeled. Like there's just a bunch of sexual confusion in your late teens and even sometimes in your early 20s, to where you play the stupid cat and mouse game, and as you get older, you just, for me, I just don't play it. Like if you want to have sex with me, if you want to fuck with me, like you're going to. I'm going to open the door. You're going to walk in it. And if not, sorry. But when we're younger,
Sexual confusion, like would I want to have sex with someone who's confused? The answer should be no.
right. Right. That's the right answer.
Right.
But if we talk to our 18-year-old selves, our 19-year-old selves, we're not going to receive that the way we're receiving it today. Not excusing it, but we also came up in a pre-Me Too climate where the way sex happened, things that were socially acceptable when we were at that age are no longer acceptable now, if that makes sense.
Sure. Yeah.
Not excusing the bad behavior. It was just, I don't know. Like I've watched motherfuckers beg. I ain't gonna say I've never begged in my life before. You know what I mean? But I realize now, like, bro, you can't be doing that. You can try once, maybe twice, but then after that, bro, like, chill. Like you're making her uncomfortable.
Right. And I think too, like people really forget about power dynamics. And especially when you're younger as a woman, like I'll say I've had a lot of unwanted sexual encounters. I don't blame people because I wasn't able to properly voice the fact that I did not want to do what happened. But it was more like, damn, if we're all in the same friend group, or damn, you're close to my friends. My perception was if I say something now, if I make a scene now, if I do something now, then that's going to affect the rest of the friend group. Now it's going to be weird with everybody. And then I would have ruined the whole thing. So let me just take this L and then things will be fine, which happened a lot. So I think like, especially with age, right? You like in many ways level up, your confidence levels up. Also your ability to get out of situations. Maybe you don't have a car. Maybe you're stranded. Maybe this is your ride. That's happened to me before. And you're stuck and you're like, I don't know how to get out of here. We didn't have Uber. We didn't have Lyft. Like at a certain time, the bus stop's running. Am I going to be walking out here? Because I could be inviting something worse if I just walk home. So yeah, I think with age and with time, things happen. But I wish that we could like build our young women's self-worth, like at teen level. Like, but I think that also like conversations with parents should happen. Like I know sometimes parents feel like uncomfortable broaching the subject, or they feel like their child shouldn't be engaging in these behaviors. I mean, whatever you feel like it's going to happen regardless. And if you can equip your daughters and your sons with better language around the situation, like that can be negated.
Yes, so my mother and I never had a real sex conversation, right?
Yeah.
It was, hey, sometimes it rains, and when it rains, you know what? You want to make sure you don't get wet, because if you get wet, things can happen that you may be stuck with for the rest of your life.
Oh my God. Sometimes it rains.
Thanks, Mom. I appreciate you telling me to wear a condom. Yes, I've, I'm almost 30. I don't have any children yet, so it's work. Thank
Right.
you. But as far as having the conversation of what do you say? How far do you go? You know what I mean? Like, I look forward to when I have children actually having that conversation. For one, if I have a son, being able to tell him, hey, shit, back in my day, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But then also teaching a daughter, like, hey, here's what the fuck I was like young.
Right.
Don't you can get better than this. I promise you. And you can get better than this from that same guy who's willing to give you bullshit if you love yourself enough and you know yourself enough to set a standard. Because here's the thing that gets missed in a lot of these sexual conversations is guys do what's worked for them.
Yes.
So if a nigga hits you with some bullshit game and you sitting there like, what?
Yeah.
At a certain age, it's worked before and it's worked more than once. So it's like, yo, this is my go-to.
Right.
So
No, I see that.
I look forward to having those real conversations with my kids because they deserve it so they can, not be sexually stupid until they're like 23.
Right. And I think I grew up in a house that was very open. However, I think it could also be because I as a function of my personality and not necessarily my parents' approach, where like I'm really about to ask my mom crazy questions. Because in my head, I'm like, well, my mom's the expert. Like, because truth be told, right? Like if a parent doesn't talk to a child about it, their friends will talk to them about it. And peers, not great because they're the same age as
virgins.
Right. And but also like, your 16-year-old friend has only been on this earth 16 years. So any wisdom they provide is not going to be great. You should be talking to your parents about it because they've been here longer and they've also been through many of these experiences and can give you, like you said, real life advice from a perspective of a man or a woman. I also appreciate my dad for that fact. I'll also ask him crazy questions and he'll say, Kyle, you're making me uncomfortable, or I don't want to talk about this, but I'll keep pressing forward and I will get an answer. And I'd rather have an answer from my dad about something about a man than I necessarily might want to have from my mom because she's not a dude. She's not necessarily thinking that way. But it's also like the race conversation, right? Like you don't want to talk about race with your kids until da-da-da, but it's like, I think babies can recognize difference in face. Definitely by age 5, children ascribe characteristics by race, can do that by race, but at 5. So you don't want to have the conversation until 12, but your child's been thinking about it since 5 and they haven't had any guidance for 7 years. The same with sex. Sex, it's on TV, it's on social media, anywhere you go. So
it's in your house.
In your house, the earlier you can talk to your children about it, the better. And coming from like the research world, like all the data says if you start early, they're more likely to not get pregnant when they don't want to be pregnant, not get STIs, things like be able to advocate for condom use. If you actually talk to your kid early, like you don't have to hope and pray, like you can actually safeguard your child by talking to them.
So you say that and I'll say the one thing that my mom did, she always left the door open for the conversation.
Okay. Yeah.
From like 12, 13. Like once I had like sex ed at school, I was like, hey mom, we got sex ed at school, blah, blah, blah. You need to sign this permission so I can have this class. After that, the door became open. Now, she wasn't going to start the conversation, and younger me wouldn't start that conversation. But because of that, I think that I was more sexually responsible than some because it was never viewed as taboo in the house as far as the act of it. But the conversation about it was one of those like, I mean, if you ask, and I'm going to talk to you about it, but we ain't gonna have this conversation if you don't need it.
I guess it's like, so the national age of sexual debut, which is what researchers call losing your virginity, is like 12 or 13. So you would want to get ahead of the conversation, regardless of when it's offered in high school. If the national average is 12, 13, like you might want to start talking to your kid at like 10, 11. Just about like, these are different body parts. Like, you can start off with that. Like, these are just different body parts. If someone touch, then you just like, now I'm not a sex ed person either, but I'm sure
you're an adult. You're a woman. You've lived some stuff that you probably aren't comfortable sharing publicly. Like,
yes.
You are qualified to talk about sex. I mean, I think anybody who has
sex, I think that's the real question. Am I?
I think so.
I as a researcher or scientist, I'm gonna say no, I'm not necessarily. Like, I don't know the best approach to how to talk to kids. Like, same thing with like race and racism. Just because you're Black doesn't mean you're qualified to talk about the Black lived experience for everybody. There's nuance. So I think it actually, like, it can be very helpful to like look up how like best practices in terms of talking to your kid. Because like, nobody was born on this earth like with a parenting manual. Nobody was born with a sex ed manual. Like, therapists, you can't go to your friends necessarily for therapy because they're not necessarily trained. They're not trained. I think like actually like maybe like low key just like humbling and this searching stuff, like researching stuff, can be actually very helpful. Because I think we think we're qualified just because I'm a woman. But I'm not, like I told you before, I can't necessarily talk to you right now about the feminist versus womanist conversation right now. Like, I'm unprepared because I didn't look stuff up. Same thing with like sex education. I never taught nobody about sex. So I don't think I'm qualified.
It's funny you say that because I got better at sex when I started reading about it.
Wow.
I got to a point in my life and I was like, let me read about this. Let me read about what I like versus what a woman likes. Let me read, like, I'm like this guy getting common things. And then also, you talk about having sex conversations with your kids, but I don't think a lot of people talk about sex the way they should before they have sex with somebody. Because you end up like having this, I don't know, what would we call it? Like shot in the dark sex, right? I like this, you like that.
Yeah.
Well, no, we like these two parts touching, but the way that they touch in the process of getting there is totally different. We've never had a conversation about it. And then we walk away from each other going like, man, that shit was trash.
Right.
And it's like, well, was it trash? Or was this person good at something and this other person good at something else, and we didn't find the common ground that we actually like? And as I've gotten older and just gotten more comfortable talking about shit, it's like, hey, I like it this way. How do you like it?
Right.
Oh, don't talk. No, if we gonna do this shit, let's talk about it. You know what I mean? I'm like, now I'm going in here doing what works for me. And then you sit there and you're not happy. If you're not happy, then we might not do this again. And I ain't gonna say we wasted our time by doing it just once. But if we could make this something we could do again, ain't nobody add no more bodies. We just haven't. You know what I mean? We fine.
Yeah. No, it always goes better with a little research beforehand. Like, I think that can be said about anything.
Absolutely.
Just brush up on the topic.
Real quick, I want to get back to one thing on this list, right? About being active bystander.
Okay, let me reread the definition.
I'm gonna read the rest of it out loud for you.
Okay.
If you notice a woman is uncomfortable with someone's behavior, be an active bystander. Don't turn a blind eye to it. It can be as simple as standing in between a woman and her harasser to block their line of sight. Ask her if she is okay. Stay with her till the harasser is gone.
I would just, because you never know about people's situations. So if I were the man, or if I was in the situation, I think I would want a man to be like, hey, are you okay? Like, are you good? If I say yes, did I feel like that's the exit to leave? Like, if I confirm yes, I'm not under duress. But but again, like intimate partner violence is also very complicated. So going back to like, you don't know what someone's situation is. I think, yeah, if you step in and you ask and the person says, no, I need help, then yeah, you should help. If the person says, I'm totally fine, I don't want to be like leave, but I don't think you should operate in a place where you're not welcomed if she doesn't want you there.
So I'm happy you have a rational point of view to this, because when I read that the first time I went through that list, I go, whoa, 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 whoa. Everybody can't save everybody from their situation. For one, you talk about partners and their own stuff they got going on. Short story, that's none of my business. Long story, what's the threat to me for helping you? Like, hey, you probably shouldn't be in this situation. You know, you deserve better than this. Whoop de whoop. But I don't know what you did to get us to this point, because I'm not going to defend a man for hitting a woman. Not going to do that.
That's what it sounds like you're about to do.
No, I was going to say I can understand how situations get to a place that is unacceptable for me.
So you're saying you can wait. So you're saying you can understand his rationale for being in that situation. That would never be you, but you could understand why.
I can understand his rationale and I can disagree with it, but I can't sit here and go, that doesn't make sense. Like, yo, if you have a female partner who is violent all the time, she always wants to hit you, and it gets to the point like, yo, you gonna stop fucking hitting me. If a dude decides to lash back, I understand it. I don't agree with it, because at the end of the day, remove yourself from that situation. And here's why I can tell you why I understand it, and I'm comfortable sharing the story on here. Halloween, a few years back, I'm in a bar, drunk, obviously. It's a packed bar because it's Halloween. You know, a lot of people are out that night. There's girls walking by me. I back up, you know, so that my man parts are not on her behind, because, yo, it's a tight bar, and if she brushed up against me, I wouldn't have been a creep for it, but like I'm super conscious of shit like that. Like, yo, like you're not here with me, we ain't on that. So like, yeah. Mm-hmm. So here's where I you could say I went wrong. I did like guide her like by her waist, just by me. Somebody, while I was doing that, grabbed her breast. Wasn't me. She turns around and goes, you grabbed my boob? I go, huh? And then I get 2 pieces in the mouth. Huh. Now, in the 5 seconds that all of this happened, and I'm saying 5 seconds to spread it out, it happened like this. I've went from saying, oh, yeah, you can go ahead through to, and not recognizing who 2-pieced me either. You know what I mean? Like, oh, I did something nice for you. I get hit in my face. So my immediate response is to put my guard up like, yo, and someone grabs me and says, yo, that was a chick. And I go, oh, yes. Because then I stop for a hot second and I put everything together. Oh, this is what happened. So because I was put in that specific situation, I can understand how in the heat of the moment, you could do something that's not okay, but I'm not excusing the actual behavior. I didn't hit the chick. I went home after that because I said, you know what? It's time for me to go home. This is a sign. I don't need to be out tonight.
I guess to that, I feel like, and like we're all rational, right? And in theory, we have control over our behaviors. So I don't think there's a reason necessarily that any person should hit another person. I'm not seeing no reason. Even if the person hits you first, like unless you want to go to jail or you want to get an assault, whatever you want to do, you want to get thrown out, you have control over yourself. You can leave. You can.
Yes, but I will say responses and adrenaline can and especially with alcohol. And there's something I can tell you off mic about this. That can put you in a place to react a certain way. But to your point, I had time to think through what I was about to do. And I was like, yeah, let me get an Uber. It's time for me to go home, bro.
But I feel like a lot of drunk people still end up in jail, right? Like that's not a defense. I was drunk. Like
it's not a defense, but for me personally, it provides some context. It doesn't tell the story.
Sure.
But every book has multiple chapters, and some of those chapters matter more than others. So that's where I look at alcohol. Like, does it lower your inhibitions? Yes. But does it excuse your behavior? Because I believe, like, if you get blackout drunk, whatever you do, that's at the core of who you are, and everything else.
Yeah, I was gonna say something like that. Yeah.
So
like, if anyone were to hit me, you're never going. Like, and I got into a not an altercation, but somebody was screaming at me because they were fighting. I'm gonna say they were trying to fight me because it's one-sided. You're never gonna see me screaming. You're never gonna see me yelling because at the core of who I am, it just never happens. And I'm never gonna fight nobody, no matter the situation I'm put in.
You don't seem like the fighting type.
I don't have it in me. I really don't, because like I was never thinking I'm never that angry about something, because nothing ever requires that much emotion. In my opinion, I've never been in a situation that required that much emotion out of me. But two, I value my life. I have a lot to live for, and I'm not trying to go anywhere that's not the path that I want to be on. So, like,
you ain't trying to spend a night in A2 or whatever they call it, A2 precinct.
That's so embarrassing. Yeah, they do call it A2. Ann Arbor. Yeah, that's disgusting. I told you I'm not a go blue person. You're never going to see me screaming. I've never been to not a single game here or North Carolina. I don't care.
Oh my God. But if they open up the big house before you go to one game.
But I will say, for the fellowship that I won, they have like a dinner at the big house. So I've been there. I just have no desire. Like, it's either raining, it's cold, it's windy. I drive past all the time.
If you can get a September game with decent weather, just for the hell of it.
That's what they told me about UNC. And seniors in any program, like if you're graduating, you get a free ticket to the basketball game, the UNC Duke game.
And you didn't go.
Didn't even pick it up. Didn't even want it.
Did you go to a Spelman basketball game?
Okay, but Spelman got rid of sports.
I was just asking if you went before y'all got rid of them.
Well, no, I'm not. Good. Like, the only sport I'm really trying to watch is gymnastics, and that's because I used to do gymnastics. But that's the only sport, and it's interesting. There's music, there's dance, tumble.
That makes sense now.
Oh, is it coloring? Yeah. I feel like whenever people realize that I've done gymnastics, I'm like, oh, they're like, oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because like I'll get on your story one day and I'll be like, where the hell did this come from?
Oh, yeah.
And now, but that makes total sense. But I was saying all of that violent shit to say that, hey, look here, sometimes you got to mind your own business. When people are having issues, you want to protect women, but sometimes women don't want to protect themselves. And you don't need to put yourself in harm's way for some shit that ain't got nothing to do with you. And that person is choosing to make a decision to deal with some shit that they shouldn't deal with. And maybe you get the opportunity to have a conversation outside of the heated discussion and say, hey, you don't have to live this way.
I think choice is interesting though. Like, I do this lecture in a class that I'm a teaching assistant for, and it's at the School of Nursing. And the idea of autonomy, or like you have full control over your destiny, I think is interesting, because in real life, there's not many people who are fully autonomous. Like, you think you're making your own decision, but you're making a decision in a constrained environment, right? Like, based off of how much money you have, based off of who you grew up. with as your parents, where you grew up, where you went to college. Like you actually aren't really making the choice autonomously. You're making it in context of all the constraints that you have in your life. And I would say the same thing for like when people tend to end up in like violent partnerships or because they're not always physically violent, right? Like people can take advantage of you economically or emotionally. But yeah, I always find that interesting. Like you said, context, right? Like if you read her whole book, maybe it's not surprising how she ended up here, or she actually didn't have much choice in the relationships that she chose. Like, I don't know. I always like to give people the benefit of the doubt. Like sometimes it's difficult, but I don't know if you've seen, this is very random, but Last Chance U, the basketball version.
I've seen it on Netflix, but I've not watched it yet.
So good. I think it's great and compared to the other ones because personally, I feel like it's because they have an all Black teaching or like coaching staff. And I think that changes the dynamic in terms of how the coaches relate to the kids personally. Okay. But I'll say like Coach Mosley was like, sometimes the people who need the most love deserve it the least in that moment. And that's kind of how I prefer me to think. Now, does that happen all the time? No. But that's how I want to be.
So you say that, and as somebody who works with people and has people who help me do my job, right, that I'm responsible for, one of the hardest parts of the job is that balance, because the people who require the majority of your attention are the people who shouldn't get it.
Yes.
And the people who deserve your attention, they actually don't need it. And then you got those people in the middle who you don't really know what the fuck they got going on, because they are 5'9", 180 pounds. They don't bother anybody. They blend in.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and they just don't do anything wrong. They don't do anything particularly great. They're just there.
Yeah.
And there's a certain level of tension that they need, because some of them could be some of your great ones if you tap into them the right way, Pauls. And then even some of those, that 10% that gets 90% of your time, some of them, once you get them figured out, they're amazing.
Yeah.
You just got to get the motherfuckers figured out. And then you had the ones where you give all the time to because you like the person. Like you genuinely like the person. But that person is terrible at their job.
Right.
They make terrible life decisions. And these life decisions have you going to meetings, reading emails, fielding phone calls, talking to baby mamas, ex-wives, and all this extra shit that has nothing to do with your job description.
Right.
But you still like that fucker. It's easy when you don't like them. But then when you actually like them, you go, oh, I see how Shorty fell for this. You have a nice personality. You are a great hang. You are a shitty person.
Right.
All can be true. And if you can't balance that, it will drive you absolutely nuts. And that's the unfortunate part of our society. And the reason why I get bothered when we overuse the race card, right? Because race problems need way more of our attention than they get.
Sure.
But a lot of times we pick and choose the wrong race problem to be the problem that gets the people who don't care about race to care. Not to say that it's not a problem that deserves attention. But then when you add all the other what's that word I'm looking for? All the other different things that could change your mind. It's like, oh, well, this person has a criminal record. Oh, well, he does this. Oh, well, his pants were hanging off of his ass. He was not a model. Yeah. None of that shit matters, because this person was treated wrong and none of this stuff had anything to do with it. And we shouldn't care about that. But to ask someone who is ignorant to our plight, to our people, to open up their mind to something that they can't relate to, they should be able to, but it's hard.
I guess, okay, so you're talking to somebody who self-identifies as a race scholar. So personally, I would say that everything goes back to race in this country. So you like overplaying the race card, I guess I would like an example of like what you mean by that.
Oh my God. I'm trying to think of something off the top of my head because a lot of the stuff that I see is that a lot of stuff that I see, I don't see it as overplaying the race card, but I'm also speaking to the minds of people who don't necessarily think the way that we think. Like
Yeah. That's I guess that's fine, but like
hold on. You brought up George Floyd earlier, right?
yeah.
And you know how some people will say, well, George Floyd did this in his life. George Floyd was high.
They're basically saying he's deserving of his death, is essentially what they're saying. Yes.
And when people look for all these other things that have something to do with this person, I go, all of that can be true, but none of that means death should have happened. And I'm not saying George Floyd isn't the one that we should, no, like that was just wrong is wrong is wrong. And I mean, even if you look at Breonna Taylor, I think the Breonna Taylor thing is a bit more nuanced than the conversation is, because no, do I defend the cops for like just shooting into the house without any regard? No. Do I think their procedures were wrong? Absolutely. But do I understand fire being returned once there's fire coming from the house? Yes. And I think that some of the nuance of that conversation gets missed in the big race conversation against police and police brutality, because yes, police brutality exists. It's there. It's a problem. It's a terrible problem. And there was police brutality involved in this particular case. But once boyfriend shoots out, whatever comes back in, it hits a little bit different for me personally, because it goes, nah, nigga, I understand why you shot. You got random motherfuckers at your goddamn door, and you know who you know the life that you're living, or the people that you were. You could know why you would shoot out at somebody being at your door who's not announcing themselves. But
I guess my thing with that is like they shouldn't have even been there.
Yes.
So the only reason why, like, we don't even have to get into the nuance of that conversation, because y'all shouldn't have even been at the door. That's where the conversation ends for me. Why were you even at the wrong house? Not to mention y'all didn't even have a warrant. So I'm confusion. I don't like. Did y'all think just because this is a black neighborhood, which is still going back to race, that you could just do whatever you wanted to do and it would be fine? Oh, because I'm not at the nuance, because we shouldn't have even been there in the first place, I guess.
And that's the hard part of that specific conversation to have, because it's like there's part of me that goes, yeah, bro, this shit should never happen. End of story. And there's another part of me that goes, excuse me, well, this happened, so there is a conversation that exists around what happened. How do we frame that conversation properly? And there's not a right way to frame that conversation, because I've had it multiple times with different groups of people, and it's.
But I feel like it's only like, what were they gonna like? Honestly, like, what did you expect though, police officers? You were gonna walk up into somebody's home, not announce yourself, bust through their whole door at night. What did you think was gonna happen? I'm confused again. Like, where was this going?
Now look, Kyle, there's three keys to this to where I live at right now. I know where two of them are, and the other one my landlord has. My landlord has never, ever, ever came in here unannounced. Never came in here without saying, hey, can we come by? Because we need to do this and that. Are you going to be home? You know, no one's ever just popped up. But I tell you, if this door shoots open right now, this podcast is over. I'm knocking over this light. that's right here to my right. I'm going straight to my room to grab my protection.
That's what I'm saying.
And yada me, you know what I mean?
That's it. What do you expect when you?
I'm gonna do what I gotta do. I'm gonna make a phone call and say, hey, here's what happened. You know what I mean? If you need to come get me, get what like, look, I'm gonna defend my house.
I mean, they have ground laws, do they not?
I'm not asking like, hey, who out there? Who is that? Y'all cool?
Right.
Nah, you kick my door in. No, motherfucker, you getting hey.
Yeah.
But look here, Kyle. We're almost going on 2 hours. It's been great talking to you. And part of that tells me that I just need to talk to you more off of a podcast because I just talk to you more. And I'll tell you why when this is over. I'm not going to tell you why in front of people. But thank you. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
I want you to come back because
yeah, this was fun. This was nice. Most of my conversations are when they're not with girlfriends, it's like school. So it's nice to be able to talk to somebody outside of the bounds of that.
Look here, I'm here and I love to talk. But again, thank you, Kyle. Thank you so much. I love having you here, bringing your perspective. And I mean, we just went down a rabbit hole talking about a bunch of shit that was not on my list of shit to talk about, which is a great podcast.
Yeah, agreed. And I can't wait to be back.
Oh, yeah, please. But look, I'm going to close it out. Don't hang up, okay?
All right.
Thanks to Kyle. And this was a great conversation. Hope you all loved it. Big baby, yeah!